Welcome back to Question Time at Alhambra Investments. Today we're going to bring in Joe and Steve. And today, guys, let's talk about manufacturing. I mean, it took a big hit back around COVID, and we're seeing some signs now that manufacturing may be turning around. It's what I'm seeing. Joe, is that what you're seeing?
Well, I wouldn't say it took a hit during COVID. It kind of took a hit after after the vaccines because that was the point where everybody started to go out and do things, eat out and do all these things. It doesn't say anything about the vaccines. I don't want to get into that. I'm just saying that's when it happened. People got confidence. They went out. There was that period when we were all locked down where everybody was buying whatever the hell they could. I gotta have a new hot tub. I'm going to be stuck in my house for the rest of my life, and I want to be comfortable. And so they bought a bunch of stuff, which you know a lot of it was very expensive because of the snafus with supply chains and so forth. But anyway, that period you sold a lot of goods is the point. And then that passed when people started to be able to go out and do things. Then the services picked up and the goods part fell down. And essentially, we've been in a recession in the manufacturing part of the economy for a couple of years now. But we started talking about this a few months ago, where it looks like things are starting to recover because inventories at the retail level, in particular, are still below where they were pre-COVID. And I believe that ultimately retailers are going to want to hold more inventory just simply because of the experience of COVID. So we are starting to see some signs of that. Last week, we got the Empire State Manufacturing Survey, these regional Fed surveys on manufacturing. That was a very positive report. We talked about that last week. I wanted to wait till this week. We got some more data today. We got the Philadelphia Fed and the Kansas City Fed. Now, it's very interesting. The Philly Fed actually did come in, turn negative again, slightly. I think it was a -6 or something like that. But that was on current conditions. So I'm going to read a couple of things here. On current conditions, they said, hey, things were a little soft last month. It went from 10.3 last month to -5.5. That's what it did. So not quite -6. But when you start looking at the forward stuff, you start looking at the future, and all these future indicators rose. New orders were down a little bit. It's still a positive number, though, in shipments as well. But when you start looking at future new orders and shipments, those indexes went to 66.2 and 52.1. Those are really, really high numbers. And just future general activity jumped from 36.7, which was already a high number, to 56.6 in November. Those are really, really high numbers. And, the prices paid number came down, which was a positive on the inflation side. It just in general, all the things that look forward looked really, really positive. Now, the Kansas City Fed was a little bit of a disappointment. I think that also came in negative a little bit. Kansas City Fed came in at, let's see, a -2. It was a -4 last month, so it improved a little bit. But you got to remember the Kansas City Fed, that Kansas City region includes a lot of oil drilling and so forth. It's not the Texas version, but in that area, there is a lot to do with energy. So some of that is more regional, not necessarily manufacturing. So in general, yeah, I think we are starting to see some inklings that manufacturing is coming back. But I think too that the election may have thrown a little monkey wrench in there. Um, we said before the election that if you get one party in control, they try to do big things. And when they try to do big things, it causes this uncertainty and it causes companies to kind of pause. And that is indeed kind of what's happening. I was looking at Rockwell Automation's quarterly call a couple of days ago. Rockwell said, look, everybody seems to be kind of sitting on their hands here, waiting to see what the new rules are going to be. And the one in particular that I think is probably having an impact is depreciation. Part of the tax cut that Trump passed in his first term, which went all the way through this term, was about depreciation. You're able to do 100% depreciation. Well, that's going to drop to 40 next year, and unless it gets renewed. And so if you're sitting there and you're about to make an investment, some long-term investment in your company, and you know that you can do depreciation 100% depreciation if they renew it, but it's only 40 if they don't, well, you wait, because obviously doing it up front is a lot better off. So I think that that's having an impact. I think the tariffs are also having a bit of an impact, some kind of positive, some kind of negative. On the positive side, I guess, if you want to think of it that way, I think a lot of companies, if they have to import things, whether it's on the to bring in to manufacture other things, intermediate goods, they're loading up right now because they don't know what the tariffs are going to be. On the other hand, that means that you're just front loading things. You're pulling the future forward to today. But I think it also means that we don't know, they don't know what to do about reshoring and so forth. So I think there's a lot of things going on there. But yeah, look, I think that at some point it won't matter. Unless the economy heads south, manufacturing's got to pick up because the inventory's got to be rebuilt.
Well, Steve, Joe mentioned reshoring with the beginnings, with the movements we're seeing now. How much reshoring do you think could take place?
Well, Morgan Stanley threw out 10 trillion in reshoring U.S. industrials, so that's one number out there. Listen, it's going to be material. But Joe's right. There's a lot of uncertainty here. The pace, when it's going to happen, that needs to be figured out, and some of it needs to be figured out by getting some clear signals from the new administration, the government. What's going to happen. I think some uncertainty has been removed. It's probably not going to be as much like things like the CHIPS Act, things like industrial policy, as you maybe saw with the last administration. It's probably going to be more tariffs, but as Joe pointed out, a lot of this is still uncertain, and the fact that the incoming administration has the power to do major change actually creates some additional uncertainty. Um, but I do think the backdrop for reshoring is very positive. It's a trend that's already underway. A big factor I would point here is just the changing relationship with China demographically. UN estimates are by the end of the century, Chinese population will be about half what it is. They're past their peak in terms of peak productivity. Demographically, their workers are aging out. Stuff's going to have to be built elsewhere. Put aside all the other issues. We're definitely going to have to bring more production back to North America. Now, a lot of that low wage stuff's going to not end up in the U.S. There's also serious questions about immigration policy. You got to have people working those plants. We're going to have to figure out what we're doing with that. So there's some serious uncertainties that need to be resolved. But I would say on a longer term basis, this is a trend that's already underway. It's probably going to pick up speed, but the timing of it and exactly what shape it takes, including the tax code, including how you staff this, including what you put on one side of the border versus the other side of the border, a lot of that still needs to be resolved. And once it gets resolved, we'll probably see a faster pickup here.
Joe, you talked and wrote before the election about a lot of this. And in particular, what happens if one party ends up with both houses of Congress, which is what's happened. Now, margins are thin, but what happens now? A lot of these decisions that have to be made, does that extend the time out even more?
Well, yeah, that's kind of what I meant when I said that, if you try to do big things, it takes time. Why does it take time? Well, yes, you're right. There's a 6 seat majority in the House for the Republicans. We saw in the last term they had a bigger majority and still couldn't get everybody to line up on the same side for some things. So that's going to be tough. They basically have to get every Republican to vote in favor of all this stuff. And in the Senate, it's only, it only takes 4 Republicans to say no to whatever it is they want to do. And you're at 49, so you can't pass things there. So it's going to be tough. I don't think people should just assume that because they have a majority, they can pass anything they want. I don't think it's going to work that way. Some of the people in Congress, maybe they have I don't know. I don't know how to put this. Maybe they're not fully on board with whatever the Trump administration wants to do, even if they're Republicans. I mean, we know that there are moderate Republicans out there, so I don't know. We'll see how that goes. I want to touch on something that Steve said though about reshoring. I think there is going to be reshoring. Don't get me wrong about that. I think that is happening to some degree. But I have to say, I don't, $10 trillion, I don't know about that. I would just point out that the trade deficit, which is supposedly what we're trying to solve here, is not a function of tariffs or anything like that. It's a function of our budget deficit. So if you want to solve the trade deficit, if you really want to solve it, I can tell you how to solve it. And I tell you what, the most important thing of the incoming administration may be what Elon Musk and Vivek Ramaswamy are trying to do in cutting spending. Because if you eliminate the budget deficit or come close or reduce it, you will reduce the trade deficit too. Regardless of what you do with tariffs, you're not going to you're not going to reduce the trade deficit unless you affect that budget deficit too. What happens is things just get shifted around. And that's what we saw the last time when Trump came in and put on tariffs. Production shifted to Vietnam, for instance, and various other places, or the Chinese transshipped it to some place. They change the tags on the thing and bring it in. There's lots of different ways to get around tariffs unless you just throw up tariffs against the entire world at such a high level that nobody can move anything. And if you have no world trade, that's not going to be good. That's not going to be a matter of reshoring. It's going to be a matter of how do we survive. So listen, I don't think it's going to be as easy as it sounds, and it's not going to be quick either. There's a lot of moving parts here. One last thing too, by the way, I think a lot of people are kind of thinking about this, is particularly with respect to China, as if China's not going to respond. And I got to tell you, I don't buy that. And in fact, I will tell you, I think they've already struck a blow. And this did not get a lot of attention. But the Chinese government just sold US dollar bonds in Saudi Arabia. They sold $2 billion worth, which is a drop in the bucket for them. This was obviously a test. And here's what the test revealed. It was 20 times oversubscribed. Chinese government debt denominated in dollars sold in Saudi Arabia. Now, I don't know exactly what that means yet. I'm thinking about it. But it seems to me that they're trying to take away or trying to say, hey, don't get too comfortable thinking that you have complete control of the dollar, because by the way, we can issue dollar bonds too. So if other governments, particularly in the global South, which is kind of what's been talked about, what if they start buying Chinese US dollar bonds? Or who are we going to sell our treasuries to? My point is, and I don't know if that's true or not, but I know that they did this, and it's such a tiny amount. $2 billion is nothing. Why did they do it? They did it as a test to see if they could do it. I don't know what the outcome is. And I'm not big on conspiracy theories, so it may mean nothing. But like I said, they're going to respond. They're not just going to say, okay, no problem. That's not the way the world works. So again, it's not going to be easy to do these things that they keep talking about they want to do. Good luck to them. I hope they're able to get some things done. I would love to see more manufacturing in the United States if we have the workers for it, but we better import those too. So I would say this, I think you're either going to have to import stuff or you're going to have to import people because we can't make it what we got now. And China, by the way, China has a demographic issue. Guess which country is adding robotics at a rapid pace? It's not us, it's China. So again, they're not going to not respond. They're going to respond. And the question is how, and what do we do about it? So I don't know. It's going to be an interesting 4 years, put it that way.
Thanks, Joe, Steve. And we'd like you to be part of the conversation. So put your comments in the comment section down below.